Did you all bring books tonight? So we're going to do intimate tonight. Hello everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. I missed the last one because I was sick, I think. Yeah? Sadly. Welcome to Scoops. I see some familiar faces, so we're not going to go through the whole rigmarole because you already know all about it. But tonight we get to meet Piers, who has done something very different. I can't wait to hear the story. Because my question is, why did you get that guy, was his Grant? Rumby? Yeah. Whoever did that casting needs to be spoken to. You're like 10 times more handsome than that dude. But he is a good actor, so I mean, I guess we'll give him that, right? Piers, thank you for coming through to Scoops tonight. On behalf of Scoops Books, we welcome you to our business book club. I'm sure Jacques has told you what's going on with him, what he's been doing. Educating South Africa, that's what we're doing. Somebody has to do it, so why not us? No, that's the truth, sir.
Hell of a job.
Hell of a job, but we're going to get there, I promise you. So on behalf of Scoops Books, I'm going to hand over to Jacques, and thank you for being here tonight. Everybody! Yes! And Jacques!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Who's been here for the first time at the Business Book Club? Great, thank you. Welcome to the Business Book Club. So the Business Book Club was started with one thing in mind, and that is about sharing knowledge, because knowledge is power. And the biggest problem that we have is we don't know what we don't know. And the Business Book Club is about sharing knowledge between each other. So that's why we have on the first Tuesday of every month, from 7 to 8, we've got the Business Book Club where we have a local author sharing their knowledge, and we have an opportunity to ask questions and engage. So as we go through the evening, please think of questions that you would like to ask and engage with our author. But it's not just about us sitting here tonight. It's also about a little library in Soweto called Signature Library. So entrance to the Business Book Club is for free, provided, like they say in the English language, but there's a donation required. And those books are being donated to the Signature Library in Soweto. Up until today, Jane, we have donated how many books? No, I can't get that. No. We've delivered to the Business Book Club, to Signature Library, probably over 500 books. And that is to a community that has access to books which wouldn't have had the access to books before. And that's really what it is about. So it's about sharing knowledge, and it's about engaging with knowledge and obtaining new info. Now tonight we've got an interesting guest. We've got Mr. Piers Cruikshanks here. Now, who has seen the movie Beyond the River? Excellent. I saw that movie twice. And there's a very good reason why I saw it twice. I mean, the photography in that movie was just absolutely to die for. You know, when you look at a movie like that, you don't say South African has rise to the standard. You just say that is world-class quality. That's it. Through the acting and through the videography of that movie. And I met Piers then at a black tie event where he shared his story with Soseko. And unfortunately, Soseko can't be with us this evening, which is his traveling buddy. But I want us to dive tonight into the story that Piers wanted to tell. Because there's an important South African story behind the story. And we're going to have a conversation with Piers about that. So Piers, welcome to the Business Book Club. Welcome to this event. And just, I mean, in the book you talk about the story that Piers wants to share. But share with us first Piers' story. So where does Piers come from? What is he about, and how did he come to be wanting to share a story in the first place?
So good evening, everybody, and thank you to Jacques and to Scoops for having us this evening. Look, I'm an English teacher, and so when you say this is about spreading knowledge, it's about we're passionate about reading. All of those things ring really true for me. One thing they say about English teachers is we all have a book inside us, and some people say mostly that's where it should stay. I don't really subscribe to that. So I'm just grateful to have had an incredible opportunity to get my story out there. As I say, I'm an English teacher at Kingsmead College in Rosebank. I'm very obviously South African. And one of my greatest passions is, aside from teaching and writing and literature, is canoeing. And I take part in the Duzi Canoe Marathon, which is a 120-kilometer race over 3 days between Pietermaritzburg and Durban, held every year in February. Yeah, I mean, how I got to the point where someone decided they should make a movie about my story is really quite a long story. But to tell you something very, to really give you the short version, I used to be a runner at school. I was passionate about running, loved running, carried on at university with running, and at some point I picked up knee injuries. I wasn't able to run anymore, so I ended up taking up the sport of canoeing, which was an endurance sport in the water, easy on the knees, I thought, and I got into this sport. It was an absolute blessing in disguise because some years later I'd represented South Africa at numerous championship events, world championship, world cups in various countries around the world, from Canada to Eastern Europe to, well, all over, really. But the Duzi was a race which I really loved. It's a tough challenge. It's there's sections where you run with your boat, sections where you're paddling through rough rapids, and it's a real equalizer. Things can happen, things can go wrong. There's a real risk and chance element in the race, yeah. So at around 2013, I've done really well at the Duzi, and I'd achieved 9 top 10 finishes. Now, for finishing in the top 10 of the Duzi, you win a gold medal, and that was always my big goal. And in the 2013 Duzi, I was 39, I think, and it's kind of my last chance to really get a gold medal. Most of the guys going for a gold medal are between 20 and 30. So at 39, needing to focus on my career, got a young family. I had other things I needed to focus on, so I thought it was my last chance. And I was doing all right in the race, not quite in the top 10. Towards the end of the third day, not towards the end actually, sorry, around the middle of the third day, there's a weir which you can either shoot, so you paddle down it and it saves you time, or you can run around it, which is a safer option, but it takes time. So I needed to make up places because I think I was 39 and not doing as well as I wanted to. And I shot this weir, and it's high. I mean, it's probably like going from this level down to the floor level, in a long slope. The entire river channels down this weir, and it's rough. And I shot down this weir, and at the bottom, I snapped my paddle. I didn't know it snapped it, and I tried to take a stroke on that side, and there was nothing there to kind of hold on to the water with. And I just fell in. My boat was washed away from me, and it washed up against rocks, and it was folded in two by the power of the water. So I ended up having to walk from there. It was 20 kilometers, shown in the movie. The movie is great, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen it. If you didn't believe Jacques, I'm also, well, you're less biased than me, actually, but the movie is great. It shows, I walked to the end of the race, and when I got to the end, I mean, it took me 4 hours maybe. You know, I was chased by dogs, and there were stinging nettles, and up and down cliffs, and eventually I got to the end. And when I got to the finish, it was getting dark. They packed up the marquee from prize giving was already gone. There were 1 or 2 fishermen there, still at Blue Lagoon in Durban. Even the person who'd driven my car there had left the keys with the timekeeper and gone. So I crossed the finish line. You have to float across the line. So I took these 2 halves of boat and kind of sank them across the finish line. And got to the end of the race. And there was a young guy there called Siseko Ntundini. He'd finished 11th that year. And he had come up through the Soweto Canoe Club, which is a club we started, the Dubula Manzi, which is the Emmarentia northern suburbs-based club, had started this club in Soweto. And he'd come through the ranks of the Soweto Paddlers. He was really quite good by the stage. But finishing 11th, he was really disappointed. So the race alternates between singles the 1 year and doubles the next year. So the same way that the Comrades goes up and down, the Easy never goes up, but you do have a singles and a doubles event. So he knew that the next year would be a doubles event and he needed a good partner. So he found out that I was battling and having a tough day, and he decided to go and wait for me at the finish line. And he had finished probably, 4 hours earlier. And he waited there till it was getting dark, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And when I eventually arrived there, he said to me, I want to paddle with you next year. And that was the start of an amazing journey. I'm not giving you much chance to ask questions. But it was the start of a journey with this guy, Siseko Ntundini. And he came from a very different background to me. As I said, he's from Soweto, but he's from a squatter camp next to Baragwanath Hospital. He'd joined paddling because we used to go there and have braais on a Tuesday night and get the guys paddling and give them boerewors rolls afterwards, and that seemed like a great idea to him, and gave him something to do. So he joined this club, and he got quite good at it. But we joined forces, and our partnership was an interesting one because he was less than half my age at the time. He was 18. As I said, I was 39. He finished 11th, I'd finished last, which he loves to tell people. If he was here, he would have told you 3 times by now. We started paddling together. Now, paddling together is a bit like running a 3-legged race. You know, you can put the 2 fastest runners in this room together, and if their stride length is completely different, they're not going to win the race because they're going to fight each other the whole way to the finish. And we were 2 really good paddlers. And, with paddling, the guy who sits in front has pedals with his feet, and he drives the boat, and he makes all the tactical decisions, and he chooses which channel down the river you need to go. And it's really important that guy has the experience. So I sat in the front of the boat, and unfortunately our boat went nowhere. We just didn't combine. And we found that there were boats that we should have been much better than that were beating us. So eventually, I was convinced by some friends, some paddling friends, that I should let him try and paddle in the front of the boat. And this is shown in the movie. That I wasn't really happy with that idea at first. But one day he sat in the front of the boat and suddenly it just took off. We were fast all of a sudden. You know, this guy was young and he had a much faster technique than I did. It kind of sped me up. Blew out a few of the cobwebs of the 39-year-old, and we just took off in our boat. And we suddenly realized that we could be quite good. Coming up to the Doozy, he picked up a stress fracture in his leg. And he sort of said to me, well, he'll just do some gym on his leg and it'll get stronger and he'll be fine. And I said to him, look, I don't know if that's going to work. Let's go and see a doctor. we went to see this guy, John Patricius, at the Morningside Sports Clinic. And he had a look at this thing and realized it was a stress fracture that was serious. And he helped us. He puts Siseko on this gravity-free treadmill. It's the most amazing machine. So you run on a normal treadmill, but you zip up yourself in a capsule, and it blows air into this capsule and lifts your body weight up as you're running. So you get the training motion of running, but without the jarring impact on your legs. It's the most incredible thing. You can choose to run with 30% weight, 20%, whatever. You can actually choose how much of your weight you want to run. It sounds good, I'm sure. It's quite an amazing thing. And we found he could run. So we were able to carry on training for the race. Then the race eventually arrived, the 2014 Duzi. Because of Siseko's injury, we weren't seeded very well. So how it works is you get seeded according to these pre-races that you've done. And we started quite far back from where we really would have liked to have been. But the race started, we got off to a great start, and 10 minutes into the race we were already in a bunch from fourth to 12th position. So we're in a bunch of 8. We're really close to the top 10. We were inside the top 10. It was going really well. And we shot this little weir, much smaller weir. It's inside Peter Marisburg still. We've got lots of spectators on the side. Our seconds were there holding spare paddles, all this kind of thing. We went down this. Siseko fell out the boat and snapped his paddle, as I'd done the previous year. And it wasn't too bad. The spectators where our seconds were with the spare paddle. They didn't see where he was running. They lost him. They weren't sure what the problem was. And we lost 5 minutes and nearly 60 positions. By the time he came back to me, I pretty much thought I sat there in the boat watching 50, what would it have been? 52 boats go past. Pretty much thought our race was over. But I just said to him, you know what, this is a 3-day race, and over 3 days you can make up a lot of lost time. And if you look at the finish of any big long race, like say a Comrades Marathon, if you watch that finish, 5 minutes is not that much. It can be the difference between, say, 3rd and 5th. It can be the difference between 7th and 8th, or it can be at that stage, at the end of the race, it's not that much. So although we were way back in 60th position, I just said to him, you never know what can happen, and let's keep going. He felt inspired and took off. We gradually started moving up through the positions, and he just kind of, I don't know, he just rose to the occasion, this guy, and he just kind of lifted the partnership. And every time we were to get out the river and run up a hill, I'd say to him, I was taking a lot of strain because I was running at the back of the boat, actually just because I was older than him. But I'd say to him, how are you doing? And he'd say to me, I'm fresh. And that was not what I wanted to hear. I wanted him to take a break and give me. But so we went on, and we went on to win our gold medal in the race. We finished 7th. Thank you. So that was our story. That was the real story before there was a movie, before I got the opportunity to write a book. Long answer to your first question.
Very, very good answer. I think you get full marks for that one. You can obviously, I mean, when you read this book, you can read. You can tell that he is an English teacher. It's very well written. It's very well put together, and there's a lot of stories in here that's not in the movie. When you start, there's 2 stories. The one story is really, you were a hardcore runner before you became a paddler. You breathed, you calculated. There's a lot of stuff that you did with running. You went overseas for some races as well.
I loved running. The trouble with running is my best time for a 5,000 meter track race was 16 minutes. And that's quick for a runner. But on that day, I think I actually wrote it in the book, if the world champion Haile Gebrselassie had been running on that day, he would have lapped me twice. So it puts it in perspective. That's why I say for me, paddling was really a blessing because it's a sport I was better at. Certainly a less competitive sport than running. I mean, sports are always competitive at the top, but you know, I think, although I loved running, it was great that I ended up paddling.
But the important thing about the running is your ability to persevere and to stay in it. You know, what I enjoyed about the running part is the absolute passion. You know, sometimes we do stuff, and when you read about why Piers did it, he did it for the absolute passion. It wasn't about the winning. It was really about. And then when the injury came, you know, you had to make a big decision, and the decision was to keep the passion burning. You know, and in business that sometimes also happens. Is, you know, a certain service offering or a certain product isn't working, which you were passionate about, and you have to change that. You have to change that into something else. And you know, Piers did that in the athletics field, and he said, well, you know, I can't do the running anymore, and I switched over to paddling. And how easy was it to start paddling, Piers? And I know, I've just tried last year.
No, it's difficult. It is tough. You know, firstly, I'm not well suited to it. Naturally, I'm a skinny guy, and cold water and skinny people is not the best combination. But you know, if you climbed in one of these boats that we raced the doozy in now, unless you've done it before, you will fall in the water. It's like riding a bicycle for the first time, only you're not 5 years old. You're 40 or you're 30 or you, however old you are now, and you're not used to doing something which is so out of your frame of reference. You climb in this thing and you fall out immediately. And it took me a long time to. I started. Incredibly, I started in June, and it's not the right time to start. You really want to start now. You want to start in spring, because you get cold. So it was tough, and it's a whole new sport, and you don't know anything, and you kind of, it's a whole world that you just don't understand. Trying to make a boat go fast was very different to trying to run fast. It was tough, and it took me a long time to kind of, guys around me sort of said you're getting good at the sport quickly, and it didn't feel very quick to me.
And I can guess, you know, you must have felt at stages that you just want to give this up. I mean, what are you doing this for? I mean, running was so easy. Can't you just go back to that?
Exactly. Yeah, I think, you know, for me, the challenge, it was the same thing in that doozy, in the 2013 doozy that I finished. You start a challenge, you've got to give it a full go before you give it up. And you know, I'm going to sort of talk about that quickly. You know, to the bronze medal, which is for finishing. They're doing it to get to the end. And if you pull out just because you're not going to win or you're not going to finish in the top 10 or the top 50, then to me it devalues their achievement. You're saying it's not worth it for a finish. But what are you saying about their challenge? So to me that was something that has always been important, is if you set your mind to something, you give it a full go and you get there.
Yes, there's so many leadership lessons from this book. I mean, perseverance is obviously one. You know, keep on going even though things are getting tough. Then there's the Soweto canoe marathon. I mean, that doesn't really come out in the movie, but what Brad and them had done it. And I mean, in the movie, everybody has seen the movie. I don't want to give away the story. No, you haven't. I'm not going to give away the story. But in the movie, somebody dies. Every movie, somebody dies. But unfortunately, in your story, somebody also had passed away. And that was quite hectic.
So with the starting of the Soweto Club, we started off by busing kids to Emmarentia to teach them to paddle. We just looked around and saw a white elitist sport and thought this is not good enough, and it's not what we want to be a part of. And so we started trying to get guys from schools in Soweto to Emmarentia to paddle, and it was incredibly expensive. And it just eventually we realised we've got to take the sport to them. And we're very fortunate in finding a dam near Power Park. If you've seen those big cooling towers, I don't know if anybody's bungee jumped off there. I've been there, but I was too scared. But there's a lake down below, or a dam down below those towers, and next to that lake is a suburb, Power Park, which I think was originally built for employees of Joburg Power or whatever it was called in those days. And there's a public swimming pool there. It was white employees, exactly, yes. So it was government employees who used to live in this little semi-suburb on the outskirts of Soweto. And now that when we went there was a swimming coach, coaching guys to swim. And that was key. We had to first coach these guys, get them to swim before they could go in a boat, before they could go in a dam with dirty water. And it went pretty well. We built up the numbers of the club. Must have been up to, I think, nearly 100 or so members, when there was a really sad incident, and one of the kids drowned, and it was a real shock. And the leader of the or not really the leader, but the instigator and the sponsor of the club, Brad Fisher, who's the CEO of AdReach, outdoor advertising company, sort of said, I think we're actually going to have to let's do soccer, let's do boxing, we'll make it the Soweto Recreation Club, forget about canoeing. And we're ready to really throw in the towel. And Brad had some business contacts with Cyril Ramaphosa, and he'd been the patron of the club from the start. And he went to Mr. Ramaphosa and said to him, look, I think we're going to have to close the club, or at least not do the canoeing anymore. And it's in the book, but our Deputy President Ramaphosa said, you know what, when I was a kid, I grew up just across the road from that dam. And I wasn't allowed near the dam because my parents were so scared I would drown. And they wouldn't let us go and play anywhere near the dam. And they were scared I was going to drown because I can't swim. And he said to us, to this day, I can't swim. You guys have taught 100 people to swim. You don't know how many lives you could save by carrying on with this initiative. And he insisted that we carry on. So we did. And since then, to tell the truth, over 1,000 kids have learned to swim through the program. Not quite that many have taken to paddling, but many of them have. And so it's been an amazing journey. I mean, the strongest canoe club in Gauteng now is the Soweto Canoe Club. It's incredible. At the Duzi this year, of the top 20 finishers, let's get my numbers right here. Yeah, the top 20 finishers, 7 were white guys, 2 of whom were international paddlers, and the other 13 in the top 20 were either from the Soweto Canoe Club or from the Duzi Valley itself, where they have development programs there too. So it's been an amazing success as well. But as you said, it wasn't without setbacks along the way.
Any success always has a setback story behind it, so it's it's part of the course. But Piers, in the book you talk about, what led to the movie, because the book came after the movie. Okay. So usually you have the book and then you have the movie. In this case, it was the movie and then the book. But the inspiration for the movie was a speech you wrote. I would have loved to see that speech. What was that speech about?
Maybe it's going to come in the next edition of the book, with a little extract at the end that I can also sell. No, look, at school I delivered a speech in assembly. It was about perseverance, and it was a slightly longer version of what I spoke about earlier. My long answer to your first question was really that, I suppose, that speech again, but without the visuals. We've got to do something. We've got to have visuals, for the speakers. I just gave a speech about really about persevering and about my story paddling with this young guy, Siseko. And yeah, an interesting thing was this and all of that. And he looked around and he saw, you know, this old crazy and starts doing his talk at the front. And straight after that, he came up and he said to me, "You know what? That was great. This thing has got to be it's got to be a movie." And that was really the start of it.
I mean, you were talking about a second book, or you just made a funny comment about that. But I really think that there's so many leadership lessons in this book that you could very easily have a follow-up and talk about the leadership lessons in it. And I guess one of the big leadership lessons is the fact, you and Siseko, and there's many regarding that. The one was, sitting at the back. Tell us about, how that was and how difficult it was and why.
So look, I mean, I think it's an obvious analogy. I never like to be the older guy, but it is the older white guy sitting in the back with the young black guy driving the boat. And for me, it was such an important thing for my own development, my own understanding. The more I backed Siseko in the front of the boat, the more he believed in himself. The more he believed in himself, the better he did. And the better he did, the more I backed him. And when things did go wrong, I backed him anyway. And because people make mistakes, not just the youngster, not just the junior, not just the black guy. So for me, that was really such an important lesson for me. And I think, it was difficult. As I said, you're the experienced guy, you want to drive the boat, I've done this 9 times before, he hasn't done it yet, you know what you're doing. And it took a lot to just rein myself in. You've got to back the guy, you've got to give him advice, but not instructions, because he's got to lead the partnership. And the fact of the matter is, the boat was going nowhere with me in front. So it was better this way around.
It's almost an analogy like, lead from the back, or lead from behind. It's about servant leadership, which is really what it's about. Any questions so far from the audience? Anybody that would like to ask Piers a question before I pop my next one? Yes.
Thank you. I think it's a privilege to meet you. I think it's a movie, for those who haven't seen it, I think it's a movie every South African should see. I think its power and its way of depicting the story. There's many lessons. So I've got 2 questions. One is that the movie tended to have that sort of monochromatic feel of the 1970s, 80s that all these South African movies tend to have, with the accents and everything. And it was dramatized. And yet, towards the end of the close, the reality is that this is talking about the South Africa that is here now. So there's a feeling like you're watching the movie and, this has happened 20 years ago or 10 years ago. It's the way they seem to make a movie. And yet, this is a very recent story. Is that an impact from your book as well? Is it a view you have that South Africa still has a long way to go in terms of how these type of stories must flourish?
All right, so let's take that first question and we'll go to the second one. So what he's asking is, or what you're saying is that the movie predicts like the old South Africa and then moves into the real South Africa. And what you're really asking Piers is, does he feel, and does his book display the fact that South Africa might still have a long time to go because of the differences between how it was displayed in the movie and how it ended?
So a very short answer is yes. Absolutely. I think it's an incredible job, as I said earlier. So it's not a criticism, but it's a movie. Absolutely. There's no doubt that there's a long way to go. And I think that the film tells that story. Can't tell you the end of the film, but there were various options for the ending of the film, and the one they chose says exactly what you said. It says that there's a long way to go still. It's not just the happy, celebratory ending to the story. It goes back, and it takes us to that place where we need to know that there's this has been a great journey, but there's a longer journey still to complete.
I would actually like to add on to that, because when I watched the movie, one of the things that was very interesting for me is in the movie, and I don't know if that was in real, in a real situation as well, where the actor, the main actor Piers, got very upset about Siseko being late, and he was very punctual about his time. And I recall myself, that's how you would be towards your cleaner who comes into your house and cleans, and if they're late, you get upset. And when you watch the movie, that becomes a reality, because you don't understand the levels of transport issues that they have to get to certain points. And that was I thought it was very well displayed in the movie.
I spoke at the beginning about how grateful I am to be part of this amazing journey, but for me it's twofold. The first was the experience of partnering with a young black guy, because you know what? I had no idea where he was coming from. I had no idea. He got to the dam every time we needed to train and all of that, and at first I had no idea. He arrived there. So for me it was a great opportunity to really access a part of our country that is so important, or that is such a huge part of our country, which I didn't understand, and I still will never fully understand. But at least I had a glimpse into it. At least I'm friends with a guy who can tell me more about it, and at least So from that point of view, I just think it's, for me personally, was such an important developmental process. People always, not always, but people see it as this kind of mentorship partnership, where I was the mentor and leading from behind in the back of the boat. And all of those things are true, but I learned just as much from Siseko, more than as he learned from me. Perhaps more difficult less tangible what I learned from him.
And what would you classify as your biggest lesson that you have learned from Siseko?
Yeah, I think it's taking the time to ask somebody where they come from and what their story is. Actually, just giving them a platform to kind of tell you, and that doesn't just happen like this. For us, it was our common language was our sport, and that's where our friendship was first built around. And over time, we related with other things, and we talked about our families, etc., and those sort of things. So for me, I think that for me will be the lesson that I hope I'll take away is when you don't know a person, you can't judge them too quickly.
And your second question.
Well, you've touched upon some of it. I mean, and I'm going to have to read the book to make sure that I can get it from the book rather than asking directly. But the movie does a very good job of taking a black and white issue, it takes that black and white, but actually really shows that we're all uniquely the same. So regardless of circumstance, houses, wealth, the human aspects, whether it's getting to work, whether it's the challenges we face in our personal life, it has a really incredible way of leveling the playing field where it moves colour, and that we are uniquely the same. Is that something that you relate to, and is that part of your story, or is it Brad's story? Is it a movie? That's my question.
So the question is, first a statement was made about the movie depicts black and white, the specific black and white issue, and how that comes together. And the question is, is that Piers' story? Because that's a story that came out from the movie, and is that something that you experienced, and how?
So look, I mean, one of the first things they did with the script of the film was when they had the outline, they sat us down and they said, listen, this is a great story. Siseko, you're an interesting guy. You come from a squatter camp. You're studying law. Your journey is extraordinary, and it's an amazing story. And Piers, you've got a you've got a great family and you've got a great job, and you're happy and your life is wonderful, and you know what? It's boring. And so they said they felt the need to break down that character, and in doing so, both the characters, main characters, are conglomerates of other people. The events are all true, but they're not necessarily our stories, not necessarily true to us in the film. I mean, my lawyer paddling partner was never a criminal as depicted in the film. But there are many people in the Soweto Canoe Club, in this community, who are, and who have got it wrong. So I'm going to get your question as quickly as I can. But I think it's important to understand that for the film there needed to be these other characters who needed to go on this journey together in an hour and 40 minutes, because that's what you've got. Whereas for me it was a more private realization. There's no doubt that when you've fought your way up to 8th position in the race and then things go wrong and the chips are down and you stuffed it up again and it's just a disaster, that we are all the same then. That it is, in that situation for me, it was me and Siseko, and it didn't matter from all. So I think that wasn't the only moment. There were lots of moments like that where I think you come to, the more time you spend with a person, the more, especially the more time you spend with a person who's so very different, the more you realize how similar you are. So I think that's really my answer is yes.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yes, thanks very much for the story. I love the movie as well. So again, just sort of tying back to the movie and how much of it is real. Obviously, the most powerful way South Africa to connect is for black and white to meet each other, get to know the story. But the other thing in the movie was the fellow white paddlers who were reacting very badly to him and to you partnering with him was real.
In the movie it depicts the fact that they were racist and against what happened, and was that really true? And how does it pan out in the real book?
I think we were incredibly fortunate in our clubs in terms of the fact that we received only support on an explicit level. We had only explicit support for what we were doing. So there was perhaps one comment once that I can remember about, I was standing there waiting and Siseko was late, and there was a comment about African time. I think that was it. That's enough, but that was it. But I do think that it needed to be in the movie because it is such a part of our society, and it is such a fault, and I speak for myself as well as others, that we don't stand up for what we believe, because it's easier to let it go. And somebody makes a comment or says something, and there's a little nudge that you kind of, you agree with me, you can't say so, but and that's not good enough. And I love it when old Steve says to the other guy, and he really gives it back to him. So I think yes, absolutely, it's something that needed to be there. I'm glad it was in the film. It wasn't our real life experience though.
Yes, another question.
That was actually more or less my question. But then also, how much did you take part in making of the movie? Not making of the movie, but did you have any saying that you want to see not to be shown in the movie? Like that with the bench for the white community that you teamed up with a black guy? Would you have been able to say that is not the truth? I don't want to have it in the movie.
So the question is, how much did Piers partake in the movie, and how much input did he have into the movie?
So I was incredibly fortunate that I had long leave due to me from the school at the time the film was being made. So I was free to be there when the filming happened. How it worked was they basically bought our life rights from us, our story from us, to make the movie. They were quite clever about it because they paid us half the amount up front, and then the other half, when the film was released. But the deal was that if we weren't happy at the end, once we saw the finished film, we could veto their right to say based on real events or based on a true story. But by then we would have had probably in the end 2 years to spend that money that they paid us for, and we would have had to pay it back. So they were quite, I think, quite strategic about it. But having said all of that, Craig Frymond, who directed it, Robbie Thorpe, who produced it, the company Heartlines, an NGO who oversaw the production of the whole film and process, were so keen to involve us in the process. They wanted it to be authentic, and they wanted it to look like the real deal, and they involved us in every aspect of it. I mean, they started with interviews for the script. Before they wrote the script, they started with interviews of ourselves and the people around the clubs, and then moved on. And from then onwards, I mean, as an English teacher, one of the things I'm passionate about is teaching film study. I love it. And for me, it was just what a privilege to be involved. So we were very involved. Although the actors only had 3 months to learn to paddle, they did incredibly well, but they couldn't paddle down the rapids. So down the rapids in the movie, I was the body double for me. So, whereas Siseko's build was too different to Lebogang Tsipo, who plays Duma in the film, who's Siseko's character in the film. So he didn't look enough like. So they got another guy from the Soweto club to double for him. So we were there and we were very involved, and it was really an amazing experience.
I mean, the leadership lessons that came out of that portion, because when Brad put together the team to film it, he said he only wanted the best, and you guys worked with the best filmmakers, and that's why the movie ended up being so awesome. And the other thing is, there's a lesson to learn about communication, or how they communicated with Piers. I mean, they brought you into everything. They made sure that you bought into all those scenes every step of the way, and that's typical what communication is. Because a lot of the time, what we do in business and communication, we give somebody a message and then we leave it. And what they did with Piers and how they got them to actually believe into their old story, even though it wasn't your story, is by getting your buy-in all the time, not just in the beginning and in the end, but all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at first, I sort of said to Heartlines, the production company, so how much involvement do you need from me in that case? So you're buying our story, but what's the involvement you expect from me? And they said, oh, look, we want you involved, and we'll make sure that that you're compensated for your involvement as well. And the overarching company, they weren't directly there. And I mean, by the time we got to the end, so yes, I put 750 emails into a folder. Was I going to go? Was it going to be £1 an email? Was it? I don't know what the expectation was. And I mean, phone calls. You lost track of how many phone calls there were. Meetings. I mean,
you're not a lawyer.
No, I'm not a lawyer. They would have kept good track. But so from that point of view, it was just our involvement was the whole time, and they wanted our input and our buy-in for, as you say, for every decision, for everything that happened, and it was too much really to keep track of in the end. I mean, they treated us well, and we're very happy with the relationship, but for the effort that we put into it.
And that involvement allowed you to call it, a true story, or based on true events. We had another question over there.
I'm quite interested in what you said that the movie came after the talk. So what was your experience of the movie and how they changed your story? And I remember from the book, I know you went home to your wife and said, this is what they're going to do in the movie. I'm not going to say what it was. You said, so now I know it's not my story. At what stage did you decide to write the book? And did you write the book to actually put the true story out?
So the question is, at what stage did Piers decide to write the true story?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'd always wanted to write a book, and if ever a publisher was going to take me on, it was when there was going to be a film released and all of that. For me, it was an opportunity that couldn't be missed. And there was a deadline because the book had to come out at the same time as the film. So all of those things contributed. But I mean, your question is really perhaps a more important answer to your question is there was too much to put into the film that I thought was important. There were so many stories around Siseko's background that were so interesting that there wasn't space for in an hour 40 of a film. I think they eventually had something like 25 hours of footage, footage of filming that they filmed for an hour 40 film. So there were a lot of things that there wasn't space for that they didn't even film, or that and I thought that those stories needed to get out there. So I think very shortly after after the decision was made that they were making a film, or as it became apparent that the film would become a reality. If someone says they're going to make a movie and you don't believe it at first, it took a while before we actually really let ourselves believe that it would happen. And at that point, I immediately wanted to write a book and to get the true story out there, and so many other things that couldn't be in the film.
I mean, the book is really amazing about the stories. I mean, there's a story about you sleeping in the huts, one of those Rudolph huts. There's a story about Siseko becoming a man and going through that process. And you need to pick the book up to find out what those stories are. I'm going to ask my last question, and then I'll give you an opportunity to ask yours. So my last question is, and this is something I really pondered about, because the age difference between Siseko and Piers is 20 years. It's massive. You're sitting in a canoe that is quite close proximity, but one of the biggest thing of this partnership, or any partnership really, to make it work, is communication. But how do you communicate with such a big age? How do you overcome those obstacles? And that's something that we're sitting with every day in today's businesses, is the millennials and the non-millennials.
So once we realized that our common language was our sport, it definitely wasn't English in the beginning. As I said, English has improved dramatically. And let me tell you something, it wasn't Zulu and it wasn't Xhosa. That was an early discovery that we realized our common language was our sport. And it was kind of everything centered around that and the feel in the boat and all of that. But I think, for me it was about the fact that we shared a common goal. So regardless of how we would have liked to have got there in our own separate ways, we come actually very different